The massive council chamber stretched out like a metal cathedral, its walls gleaming under artificial starlight. Thousands of alien delegates filled the curved seats, their strange voices creating a constant buzz of conversation. In the far corner, almost hidden from view, sat the human section. It was small, cramped, and clearly placed there to show how little the galaxy thought of Earth's children. Ambassador Kim Soo-jin adjusted her simple blue uniform and tried to ignore the pointed stares. She had been doing this job for 8 years, now sitting through meeting after meeting, where aliens treated humans like annoying children who had wandered into an adult conversation. Today was no different. The Valerian delegate, a tall creature with silver skin and too many eyes, was making jokes about human intelligence again. His words echoed through the chamber's translation system. Perhaps the humans could handle cleaning duties while we discuss real galactic matters, he said, causing ripples of laughter from his allies. Kim's jaw tightened, but she kept her face blank. She had learned long ago that showing emotion only made things worse. Behind her sat Captain Lee Woo-bin, officially her military advisor, but really her only friend in this place. His weathered face showed the strain of the past few months. Dark, circles ringed his eyes, and his hands shook slightly when he thought no one was looking. The reports from the outer colonies were getting worse every day and nobody was listening. Another system went quiet yesterday, he whispered to Kim during a break in the proceedings. That makes 12 in the past month. Something is hunting us out there. Kim nodded grimly. She had read the files. Entire colonies of humans just gone. Not destroyed, not conquered. Simply erased as if they had never existed. The few scattered distress calls they had received made no sense. People screaming about shadows that moved wrong, about reality bending and breaking, about children disappearing while their parents watched helplessly. When Kim had brought these concerns to the council 3 weeks ago, the response had been predictable. The Century Federation representative had suggested that humans were simply too primitive to properly maintain their colonies. The ethereal collective had wondered aloud if humans were making up stories to gain sympathy. Even the normally reasonable Aquatic Alliance had dismissed the reports as human paranoia. Your species has always been dramatic, the aquatic delegate had said, her voice dripping with condescension. Perhaps you should focus on learning proper colonial management before expanding further. The humiliation had burned, but Kim had swallowed it like she always did. That was the human way in the galaxy. Smile, nod, and try not to cause trouble. Earth needed the trade agreements and protection treaties that came with council membership. They could not afford to make enemies. But something was changing. Kim could feel it in the way other humans looked at her now, in the messages that came from Earth through encrypted channels, in the strange reports from human military units stationed throughout the galaxy. There was a tension building, like the moment before a thunderstorm when the air itself seems to hold its breath. Captain Lee had noticed it too. My contacts in the fleet are saying odd things, he had told her just that morning. Ships appearing where they should not be. Weapons tests that officially never happened. Officers asking questions about ancient protocols that were supposedly retired decades ago. Kim remembered her first day as ambassador, when the previous representative had pulled her aside for a private conversation. The old man had looked tired, worn down by years of diplomatic insults and casual dismissal. But his eyes had held something else, a warning perhaps, or a promise. Remember, Soo-jin, he had said, we are not what we appear to be. We never have been, and someday the galaxy will understand that. At the time, she had thought he was just bitter from years of mistreatment. Now, as she watched the aliens debate, trade routes while human colonies vanished into darkness, those words echoed in her mind. The Valerian delegate was speaking again, his voice filled with the casual arrogance that had become so familiar. The human delegation may observe, but real decisions require real civilizations. Kim felt something snap inside her chest, a sound like breaking glass that seemed to echo through dimensions she could not name. For the first time in 50 years of diplomatic contact, she allowed herself to truly look at the alien who had spent so much time mocking her species. He was not laughing anymore. Something in her expression had changed, something that made even a being who had lived for 3 centuries take a step backward. The storm was coming. and it would change everything. The council chamber had been buzzing with the usual boring talk about shipping lanes and tax rates when everything changed. Ambassador Kim Soo-jin was half listening to a Century delegate complain about human cargo inspections when her communication device started beeping urgently. The sound cut through the alien chatter like a knife. Captain Lee Woo-bin leaned forward, his face going pale as he read the incoming message. "Kim," he whispered, his voice shaking. "You need to see this. It's from New Busan Colony." Kim felt her stomach drop. New Busan was one of humanity's newest settlements, home to nearly 2 million people, including thousands of families with young children. It was supposed to be safe, protected by early warning systems and defense satellites. The colony had gone silent 3 days ago, but that wasn't unusual. Sometimes solar storms interfered with communications. "Put it on the main screen," Kim said, standing up from her seat. Her voice carried across the chamber, cutting through the alien discussions. Emergency transmission from human space. The massive display screens that lined the council walls flickered to life. What they showed made even the most hardened alien diplomats fall silent with shock. The camera was shaking, obviously handheld by someone running. Through the static and interference, they could see the familiar buildings of New Busan's main settlement. But something was terribly wrong. The sky was the wrong color, a sickly green that seemed to pulse with its own light. And there were tears in the air itself, jagged wounds in reality that showed nothing but swirling darkness beyond. "This is Colony Administrator Park Jin-ho," came a desperate voice through the speakers. "Day 3 of the attack. They're not from our dimension. They're something else entirely. Something that shouldn't exist." Through the tears in space, things began to emerge. They looked like smoke given form, constantly shifting between states of matter. Sometimes they appeared solid. Sometimes they flickered like bad television signals. But their eyes, if those burning points of light could be called eyes, remained constant, ancient and hungry, and completely alien. The camera turned to show colonists running through the streets. Kim watched in growing horror as one of the creatures touched a fleeing woman. She didn't die in any normal sense. Instead, she began to fade, becoming translucent, then transparent, then simply gone. Not killed, not destroyed. Erased from existence as if she had never been born. "They don't just kill," Administrator Park's voice continued, now barely holding back panic. "They unmake things, people, buildings, memories. My daughter, I can remember that I had a daughter, but I can't remember her name or her face. They took even that from me." The worst part came next. The camera captured a school playground where children had been playing when the attack began. Kim watched, frozen in horror, as the creatures moved among them like living nightmares. The children weren't screaming anymore. They couldn't scream. They were dissolving into static, their very essence being consumed by things that existed outside normal reality. Parents reached for sons and daughters who were already more ghost than human. A father held his arms around empty air, crying for a child whose name he could no longer remember. A mother sang a lullaby to silence, her mind struggling to understand why she felt such overwhelming loss for something her memory insisted had never existed. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the council chamber in complete silence. 2 million people gone, not dead, gone. Erased so thoroughly that soon even the records of their existence would begin to fade. Ambassador Kim stood slowly, her hand steady despite the rage building inside her chest. For 50 years, humanity had followed every rule, obeyed every protocol, submitted every request through proper channels. When pirates attacked human ships, they had filed reports and waited for justice that never came. When trade disputes left human colonies without supplies, they had negotiated patiently while their people suffered. But this was different. This was extinction, and it was happening while the galaxy debated procedure. 3 months ago, Kim said, her voice carrying across the silent chamber, "We brought evidence of these attacks to this council. We followed your protocols. We submitted our reports through proper channels. We waited for your committees to review our claims." Her words seemed to change the air itself, making it thicker, harder to breathe. Even the ancient ethereal collective, representatives, beings of pure energy who had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations, began to shift uncomfortably. While you debated whether our evidence was sufficient, 12 human colonies have been erased from existence. 2 million people consumed by entities that your science cannot even acknowledge exist. Our children dissolved into nothing while you questioned our competence. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Kim's voice remained calm, but there was something underneath it now, something that made predator species instinctively back away. We asked for help. We begged for assistance. We offered to share our research and coordinate our defense efforts. You ignored us, dismissed us, treated us like primitive children making up stories to get attention. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates who had spent decades mocking humanity's weakness. That ends now. The first sign that something had changed came exactly 6 hours after Ambassador Kim's declaration. Across the galaxy, human ships that had been dismissed as outdated cargo vessels suddenly stopped pretending to be harmless. The transformation was so swift and complete that alien intelligence networks initially thought they were seeing sensor errors. The cargo ship, Peaceful Trader, had been docked at Centauri Station for routine maintenance when the alert came through. Station Commander Veltar, a veteran Sentry officer, watched through his observation deck as the human vessel began to change. What he had assumed were simple cargo containers started unfolding like metal flowers, revealing weapon arrays that made his station's defenses look like children's toys. "This is impossible," he muttered, checking his instruments again. "Those energy readings, they're off the charts." Captain Han Jiwoo's voice came through the communication system, calm and professional. "Station Command, this is Captain Han requesting immediate departure clearance. We have a situation to handle." "Captain, your ship is not equipped for military operations," Commander Veltar replied, still staring at the impossible readings on his screens. "You're registered as a civilian cargo vessel." Han's laugh was cold and humorless. "Commander, a lot of things are about to change. You might want to update your files." The ship that undocked from Centauri Station bore no resemblance to the rusty freighter that had arrived days earlier. Sleek armor plating had emerged from hidden compartments, covering the hull in overlapping shields that seemed to bend light around them. Weapon ports glowed with energy signatures that violated several fundamental laws of physics. Most disturbing of all, the ship moved with a grace and speed that should have been impossible for something its size. This scene was playing out across hundreds of systems simultaneously. Human vessels throughout the galaxy were dropping their disguises, revealing themselves to be something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. But the ships were only the beginning. Colonel Park Min-ho had been listed in Galactic military databases as a mid-level logistics officer stationed on a remote human outpost. His record showed no combat experience, no tactical training, nothing that would suggest he was anything more than a bureaucrat in uniform. That assessment lasted exactly as long as it took for the first reports to reach alien military headquarters. "Sir, you need to see this," Lieutenant Kexhai told his Valyrian commander, his voice tight with disbelief. "The humans have established a command structure that spans the entire galaxy. Somehow they've been coordinating defensive positions for years without anyone noticing. The holographic display showed something that should have been impossible. Human forces, previously scattered and apparently unorganized, were moving with perfect coordination across dozens of star systems. Supply lines that had never existed before materialized as if they had always been there. Defense platforms that weren't on any official records suddenly activated around vulnerable worlds. At the center of it all was Colonel Park, issuing orders from a command ship that didn't exist in any registry. His tactical decisions showed an understanding of galactic military doctrine that surpassed most senior alien commanders. More troubling, he seemed to know exactly where the void spawn would attack next, positioning his forces with impossible precision. The creatures themselves, writhing masses of living darkness that existed partially outside normal space-time, had swept through the Andorian cluster like a plague. 3 separate alien civilizations had been completely erased from existence, leaving behind empty worlds where the very concept of life had been consumed. The Corvan Defense Fleet, considered one of the galaxy's most elite military units, had lasted less than 4 hours against them. Then they met Captain Han Ji-woo's squadron near the binary stars of Kepler 442. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations, assuming there were any academies left when this was over. The human ships didn't fight like anything the galaxy had ever seen. They moved in perfect synchronization, as if controlled by a single mind, executing maneuvers that required split-second timing across vast distances of space. The Void Spawn had adapted to every weapon and tactic they had encountered before. They shifted between dimensions to avoid projectiles, absorbed energy blasts to fuel their own growth, and turned enemy ships' shields against them. Nothing had worked against them. Nothing had even slowed them down. Captain Han's fleet used none of those conventional approaches. Instead, they deployed weapons that seemed to rewrite the fundamental rules of reality in localized areas. Where the creatures existed partially outside normal spacetime, the human weapons forced them fully into one dimension or the other, making them vulnerable to destruction. "How are they doing this?" demanded Admiral Korvash of the Ethereal Collective, watching the battle unfold through quantum sensors. "Those weapons shouldn't exist. The energy requirements alone should tear their ships apart." But the human vessels showed no signs of strain. If anything, they seemed to grow stronger as the battle continued, their mysterious power sources adapting and evolving in real time. Captain Han himself moved through the combat zone like a conductor leading an orchestra, his ship dancing between dimensional tiers while coordinating attacks that struck with surgical precision. The Void Spawn, for the first time since they had emerged from whatever nightmare dimension had spawned them, began to retreat. The beings that had consumed entire civilizations without effort found themselves outmatched by an enemy they had dismissed as primitive. Within hours, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Human forces were engaging the creatures on dozens of fronts simultaneously, and they were winning. The weakest military in known space was systematically destroying an enemy that had proven unstoppable against everyone else. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as everything they thought they knew about humanity crumbled into dust. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called within 12 hours of the first human victories against the Void Spawn. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered in shock, their previous arrogance replaced by confusion and growing fear. How had the weakest species in the galaxy suddenly become its most powerful defenders? Ambassador Kim Soo-jin no longer sat in the corner designated for junior members. She had moved to the center of the chamber, and no one had tried to stop her. The change in her demeanor was startling. Gone was the quiet diplomat who had endured decades of insults. In her place stood someone who carried herself with the confidence of hidden knowledge. "I believe explanations are in order," said Chancellor Vextar of the Century Federation, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Our intelligence networks show impossible things. Human ships that don't exist in our databases, military commanders with no official records, weapons that violate the basic laws of physics." Kim smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Your intelligence networks see exactly what we wanted them to see. Nothing more, nothing less." Before anyone could respond, the chamber's main doors opened, with a soft hiss. The figure who entered made every alien representative take an involuntary step backward. Director Yoon Taemin looked like an ordinary human in his simple gray uniform, but something about his presence changed the atmosphere of the room. When he walked, reality seemed to bend slightly around him, as if space itself acknowledged his authority. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance," Director Yoon said, his voice carrying easily across the vast chamber without amplification. "But circumstances require that certain truths finally be revealed." The Ethereal Collective's representative, a being of pure energy that had existed since before most species had evolved language, flickered with agitation. "You speak as though you have been deceiving us for millennia. Humanity has only been part of the galactic community for 50 years. Director Yoon's laugh was soft and terrifying. 50 years of official contact, yes, but we have been watching you for much longer than that. We have been watching all of you." He gestured, and the chamber's holographic displays came to life. without anyone activating them. Images began flowing across the screens, ancient star charts showing human settlements that predated first contact by thousands of years, monitoring stations hidden in asteroid fields throughout the galaxy, quantum, listening posts that had been recording alien communication since before some civilizations had developed spaceflight. We arrived in this galaxy long before any of your species achieved interstellar travel. Director Yoon continued. We came as refugees from a place that no longer exists, fleeing an enemy that consumes entire realities. We knew they would follow us eventually. We knew we would have to be ready. Admiral Kolvash of the Valerian Empire, his silver skin pale with shock, pointed at the displays. These installations, they've been monitoring us for centuries. You've been spying on every civilization in the galaxy. Protecting, Director Wang. Yoon corrected gently. We have been protecting you, though you never knew it. Every trade route you consider safe we cleared of interdimensional parasites first. Every peaceful first contact between species we orchestrated after eliminating threats you never saw. Your entire civilization exists because we have been standing guard at the edges of reality. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. Everything they thought they knew about galactic history was wrong. The peaceful expansion of trade and diplomacy hadn't been natural evolution. It had been carefully managed by an unseen guardian species. Captain Lee Woo-bin, who had been standing silently behind Ambassador Kim, stepped forward. Except his uniform, now bore the insignia of Admiral Lee, and the transformation in his bearing was remarkable. The human colonies that have been disappearing over the past months were not random attacks. The Void Spawn were testing our defenses, probing for weaknesses. We allowed some colonies to fall to maintain our cover, while we prepared for the real assault. The Aquatic Alliance representative made a sound like grinding coral. You sacrificed your own people to maintain deception? Admiral Lee's expression didn't change. We sacrificed volunteers who knew the stakes. Every colonist in those outer settlements was a trained operative. Their families knew they might never come home. They died to save trillions of lives across the galaxy. Director Yoon activated another display, this one showing the quantum echoes of dead galaxies. This is what happens when civilizations face the Void Spawn unprepared. 14 galaxies consumed completely. Trillions of species erased from existence so thoroughly that even their memory fades from reality. We are the survivors of the 15th galaxy to face this threat. We will not allow this galaxy to become the 16th. The chamber fell into stunned silence as the true scope of humanity's deception became clear. Every moment of apparent weakness, every diplomatic humiliation, every trade rejection had been carefully calculated. The galaxy's dismissal of human capabilities hadn't been an oversight. It had been the entire point. You needed to see us as harmless, Ambassador Kim explained. If you had known our true capabilities, some of you would have tried to conquer us. Others would have demanded our technology. The resulting chaos would have left the galaxy vulnerable when the real threat arrived. Admiral Choi Sun-woo materialized on the main display, broadcasting from the bridge of a ship that hadn't existed in any database hours earlier. Her face bore the marks of recent combat, but her voice was steady. The deception ends now because the Void Spawn have committed fully to this invasion. They believe this galaxy is defenseless because that is what we wanted them to believe. The assembled representatives watched in awe and terror as the human admiral coordinated battles across dozens of star systems simultaneously. Her tactical decisions showed knowledge of enemy capabilities that could only come from centuries of study and preparation. Every slight, every insult, every moment you dismissed us as primitive served our purposes, Director Yoon concluded. You helped us maintain the greatest deception in galactic history. And because of that deception, your civilizations will survive what's coming. The age of secrets was ending, and the galaxy would never be the same. The final battle lasted 18 hours and changed the fundamental nature of reality itself. Admiral Lim Hee-jin stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching as the massive dimensional tear that had brought the Void Spawn into their galaxy slowly began to close. Her fleet had taken heavy losses, but they had done something no other civilization had ever accomplished. They had not just survived an encounter with the creatures from beyond, they had driven them back. Sealing charges are in position, reported Captain Song Yun-ji from her engineering vessel. Reality anchors are holding steady. We can close this gateway permanently, but Admiral, once we do this, there's no going back. The entire galaxy will know what we're capable of. Admiral Lim nodded grimly. For millennia, humanity had hidden in the shadows, protecting a galaxy that didn't even know it needed protection. That age was ending. Do it, Captain. Seal the breach. The explosion that followed wasn't visible to normal sensors. It happened on levels of reality that most species couldn't even perceive. Space-time itself rippled as the doorway between dimensions collapsed, trapping the surviving void spawn on the other side where they belonged. For the first time in 3 months, the galaxy was truly safe. But the cost of that safety would reshape everything. The new Galactic Council chamber looked very different from the old one. The curved seating arrangement that had emphasized equality among species was gone, replaced by a more practical design. At the center sat Director Yoon Tai-min, no longer hiding behind the facade of a simple diplomat. Around him, in positions of clear authority, sat the human administrators who would now oversee galactic security. The other species had their representatives present, but their role had fundamentally changed. They were no longer independent powers negotiating as equals. They were protected worlds under human guardianship, and everyone in the room understood what that meant. The reconstruction efforts are proceeding ahead of schedule, reported Administrator Park Ji-min, consulting her datapad. 47 worlds damaged by void spawn incursions have been stabilized. Reality repair crews are working around the clock to fix the dimensional weak points they left behind. Director Yoon acknowledged the report with a nod. The past 3 months had been the bloodiest in galactic history, but also the most transformative. Species that had spent centuries bickering over trade routes and territorial disputes had watched in stunned silence as humanity revealed the true scope of their capabilities. The Century Federation had lost 3 entire star systems to void spawn attacks. Their survivors owed their lives to human intervention. The proud Valerian Empire had seen their capital world nearly erased from existence before Captain Han Ji-woo's fleet arrived to drive back the creatures. Even the ancient ethereal collective, beings of pure energy who had thought themselves above physical threats, had been forced to retreat behind human-constructed reality shields. The defensive network is nearly complete, Captain Song reported from her position at the engineering console. Her crews had been working non-stop to install quantum barriers around every inhabited system in the galaxy. The technology was purely human, incomprehensible to alien scientists, and absolutely necessary for survival. Some of the Outer Rim species are asking questions about the barriers, noted Ambassador Kim, who had retained her diplomatic role despite the massive changes in her authority. They want to know how the technology works, whether they can build their own defenses. Director Yoon's expression didn't change, but everyone in the room understood his position. Human technology would remain in human hands. The galaxy had proven it couldn't be trusted with such power. Tell them the barriers are a gift, not a trade agreement. They will be maintained by human personnel, and human personnel alone. The transformation hadn't been easy for anyone. Many alien civilizations struggled with their new role as protected rather than independent species. There had been protests, diplomatic complaints, even a few attempted rebellions that were quietly suppressed before they could gain momentum. But the alternative was extinction, and everyone knew it. The Corvin hegemony is requesting permission to expand their mining operations in the Vega system, Administrator Park continued. They claim they need the resources for economic recovery. Denied, Director Yoon replied without hesitation. The Vega system sits on a dimensional weak point. Mining operations could destabilize the barriers we've constructed there. Their economic recovery is less important than galactic security. This was the new reality. Human decisions were final, human safety protocols were non-negotiable, and human oversight extended to every aspect of galactic civilization. The species that had once mocked humanity's weakness now waited for human permission before making major decisions. There's been some grumbling from the Aquatic Alliance about our trade restrictions, Ambassador Kim reported. They don't understand why we're limiting certain types of technology transfers. Director Yoon turned to address the alien representatives, who were present for this portion of the meeting. His voice was calm but carried the weight of absolute authority. The Aquatic Alliance, like all our protected civilizations, will follow the protocols we have established. These restrictions exist for your own safety. You do not have the knowledge to understand what certain technologies might attract from beyond our dimensional barriers. The aquatic representative, a being that looked like living water held in a roughly humanoid shape, rippled with what might have been frustration. Director, with respect, our civilization is ancient. We have managed our own affairs for millions of years. And in those millions of years, how many times did you face creatures that could erase your entire species from existence? Director Yoon asked quietly. How many times did you successfully defend against entities that exist partially outside reality itself? The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the answer. Captain Song looked up from her engineering reports. The new monitoring stations are online. We now have full coverage of all dimensional activity within the galactic disk. If anything tries to break through from outside reality again, we'll know about it immediately. Director Yoon nodded approvingly. Excellent. And the response fleets? Positioned and ready. Admiral Lim has established rapid response groups in 12 sectors. Any threat can be met within hours instead of days. The efficiency was stunning, and more than a little frightening to the alien observers. Humanity had revealed not just advanced technology and hidden military forces, but an organizational capability that spanned the entire galaxy. They had been planning this transition for centuries, and it showed in every detail. We never wanted to rule you, Director Yoon said, addressing the alien representatives directly. We wanted to protect you, but protection requires authority, and authority must be respected. The alternative is chaos, and chaos means extinction when the next threat arrives. And there would be a next threat. Everyone in the room understood that the void spawn had been just the beginning. Somewhere beyond the galactic barriers, other horrors waited in dimensions that defied understanding. When they came, the galaxy would be ready, because humanity would be watching.